And we go on. So next we will have some investors talking about what is hot and what is not. First, Gunita, then Aline and Pekka, please, stage is yours. Choose freely. Before we get started, Gunita, I have one question for you because you come from the corporate VC. What corporate VC can provide that normal VCs and other such can't provide?
Sorry, what was the question?
What the corporate VC can provide which the normal VCs cannot?
Yeah, great question. So I would say that corporate VCs kind of combines the best of both worlds in a way. So we have access to strategic insights and ability to help startups with finding relationships and making connections within, like, tapping into the broader Unilever network as well, which is really helpful. And actually, at Unilever Ventures, we're set up as a fund for financial returns as well. So we invest with a fund structure. So, but we can at the same time bring insights from the rest of Unilever as well.
So, in other words, you are saying that your milkshake is better than our others. Enjoy. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for warming us up. Let's just introduce ourselves a little bit as well. So I'll start by introducing myself, and then I'll hand it over to Aline and Pekka to introduce themselves as well. So hi, I'm Gunita. I'm the moderator, and I work for Unilever Ventures. We are a venture capital fund backed by Unilever Group, as the name suggests, and we invest across 3 focus areas. The first one is beauty and wellness, which also includes digital health as part of that proposition. The second one is e-commerce and e-commerce enablers. And the third one is enterprise tech, particularly as relevant to CPG industry. So maybe, Aline, would you like to go first and introduce yourself?
Hi, everyone. I'm Aline. I'm an investor at Lakestar. As you can hear from my accent, I'm from Germany, based in our Berlin office and focused on anything health tech. Have spent the past 6 years in a venture, always with a focus on healthcare and health tech, and have, in terms of background, a PhD in medical psychology. Also started a postdoc, but then at some point decided against the academic career, and ever since have been investing. And Lakestar as a fund is focused on both early stage as well as growth stage innovation. Means we invest along anything from seed up to B or C rounds. We can do that because we invest out of 2 funds, and the early stage fund is 250, the growth fund is 650 million, means we can do anything between 1 to 60 million euros, and have, in terms of healthcare portfolio, a focus on Europe, but also selectively invest in the US.
And my name is Pekka Simula. I'm a physicist, and after 20 years in health and life sciences startup world, turned into a founding partner at Innovestor Life Science VC fund. It's a 90 million euro venture capital fund investing in early stage life sciences. Our punchline is that we invest in life-saving science. So we always like there to be strong science behind. Our sweet spots are pre-seed to Series A and drug development and digital therapeutics.
Thank you. Thank you both for the introductions, and really interesting to hear the different stages that you invest in as well. So obviously this is a panel on insights into trends in health tech. Now, before we kick off into some of our investor insights, I thought it'd be helpful for each of us to tell us a bit about how we define health tech. So, for example, like when we look at health tech, we look at it as part of our beauty and wellness bucket. So that includes digital health, but also wellness more broadly, like supplements and more holistic health as well. So Aline, when you look at health tech, what does that mean to you?
So if I want to differentiate between wellness and health tech, I guess the wellness side would be a bit more people who are not ill yet, but are quite focused on managing their health proactively, detecting potential diseases early on. So that's the wellness side for me, I guess.
Yeah.
And the health tech side would be anything beyond that. And then in terms of interest as a fund, I always find it quite hard to pinpoint because it's literally every kind of technology that touches the healthcare system that we would define as health tech. It's a bit easier to exclude some areas that we don't invest in. So we wouldn't necessarily invest in medtech. We just don't have the best kind of expertise there. Same for medical devices. That's a bit out of scope for us as well. But then again, when it comes to health tech, the applications are quite different. So to give you some examples, we invested, for example, in Cedar Health and Oscar Health. That's the intersection of fintech and healthcare. We invested in Accurex, which is a UK-based company which works as a communication platform for healthcare professionals catering to the NHS. And we also invested quite early stage recently in Germany in a warehouse, which is a diagnostics platform. So pretty broad in terms of scope.
No, great. And of course, I know of Accurex. Living in London, I have had my GPs contact me via Accurex. And also interesting how you draw the distinction between the preventative healthcare, which would be more like wellness side of things, and then the, I guess, curative health tech as well. Pekka, would you like to talk about what health tech means for you?
I think that was a wonderful definition of health tech in general, even though I would maybe also see some preventive approaches as health tech. But then for our investment field, we narrow it down to B2B, and we narrow it down to something that's science-based. So we wouldn't do like telehealth approaches, even though that's clearly health tech by definition, in my opinion. But we could do things that are actually interpreting the data coming from a telehealth system or patient devices, analyze the data, get a better understanding, and actually impact clinical decision-making.
Yeah, that makes sense. I guess it's good to have the data angle when you're looking at health tech as well. Okay, so maybe now we can go into the topic that people are interested in, which is trends in health tech. So what are some of the key trends you're seeing in health tech investments today? What is it that you're most excited by, and where do you think the opportunities lie? Would you like to go first, Pekka? You're smiling.
Sure.
Yes.
Happy to. I think what we'd like to see definitely is digital therapeutics. And we also think that maybe the hype was taken a bit too far there. So now people have been using their digital therapeutics in Germany under the DiGA, and they haven't been as great financial successes as they were hoped to be. So I think the hype's come down a bit. So I think there's kind of the industry is taking a deep breath there. So I think we'll have to wait for kind of the next wave in that sector. Data is obviously a huge thing. How can you use your approaches to collect data to understand, and how can we leverage the data, use machine learning and AI approaches to help clinical decision making based on the data? And I think one of the big questions there is who's responsible. So is the responsibility with the physician? And if it is, how well does the physician need to understand what the health tech system actually does? But then from a bigger kind of very high level view, if we look at just the sectors, I think that mental health is a big space for things like that, obesity, obviously, and cardiology. I think the way we see it is those are all kind of underrepresented fields, considering how big they are, how big impacts they are to the society.
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned the DiGA and mental health. I was actually looking into the space in terms of mental health startups that use the DiGA's fast track scheme in Germany. And I think one of the things, I don't know if you've had a similar experience, one of the things I discovered was around the lack of it's still nascent market. So there's a need to build up insight amongst the doctors to prescribe this product, and also amongst the patients to take it up as well. So it's interesting that you mentioned that. Okay, Aline, would you like to maybe share some of the insights that you're seeing on trends in health tech?
Yeah, some good points were mentioned already, so I think I agree with all of these trends that you lined up. And in general, in healthcare, I think we work a lot across big themes that we're interested in. So there would be, for us, 3 of them: prevention, personalization, and prediction in healthcare.
Okay.
So the prevention side could be DTX, for example, that are focused on prevention, could be consumer health innovation, thinking about companies like Prenuvo in the US, or thinking about companies like Daniel X, Nico Health, which are somewhat putting the patient at the center of innovation and enabling the patient to be more proactive about healthcare. And then in terms of prediction, it could also somewhat tie in with the preventative aspect, actually making sure early on that you know what kind of health risks a person will encounter at a certain point, or also that you detect early on and predict what kind of health risks they will have at some point in time. And in terms of personalization, I think that's also always an interesting one, because we heard it on the panel beforehand. To some extent, personalization in healthcare is already there. However, I think if we look at lots of the innovation that is happening right now, for example, in telemedicine, is this often literally a translation from the physical interaction into a virtual setting, which is per se not very personalized yet. And I would hope at some point that that kind of interaction is more personalized, and same actually for the prescription of drugs, for the prescription of digital therapeutics to drugs. So I think that's an important theme that we continue to focus on. And if you want to go a bit more in terms of areas of investment that tie into that, I think it's anything DTX, as mentioned. I think it's also topics that sit at the intersection of fintech and healthcare. We're spending quite a bit of time there, especially if you think about an economic downturn and the implications here. I think these kind of solutions that actually provide quick ROI for the healthcare system can actually be seen as part of solving the problem, and are actually quite interesting these days. And then we also look quite a lot at hospital data infrastructure, for example. So that's another interesting area that I want to focus on.
Thank you. And it's interesting how you mentioned like both the personalization angle of things, which I think is very important, because health is very individual specific. It's harder to kind of have a general one-size-fits-all solution. But it's also interesting what you said about the personal prediction side of things. Are you thinking about longevity when you say that? Because I was reading this book called Outlive, which talks about how, I'm still in the early stages of the book, but it's talking about how most of the health they're the four horsemen of health killers, and a lot of those can be predicted or like preempted earlier in life, and it's about finding and identifying those health concerns earlier in life, and then trying to address that. So in your, right now it's all about at the point in time when someone falls ill that you diagnose them, or when they're pre-diabetic, for example, but you need to find it in the early onset. So is it kind of like longevity you're thinking about when you talk about prediction?
Could be longevity, could also be stuff beyond that. So I think it's like prediction, it's a very, very broad area. Could also be like immediate risks or anything beyond that.
Yeah. Yes, Pekka.
I mean, I think that's a very interesting topic for discussion, the preventive side. Whether the hope is to aim longevity or whether it's just to improve health economics or reduce the costs to societies. But what's your take on business models when it comes to preventive approaches? Because that's something that we are struggling with. We see a lot of approaches, great ideas for preventive healthcare. And for instance, in the Nordics, it's really difficult to find a payer, even though it's obvious that if something like, an efficacious obesity management app was taken in use for people who need it, that would save a ton of money for the society. But there's no one who's going to pay for it. So have you ideas on how to solve that problem?
I'll let you speak. I mean, I think it would have to go B2B, because the employers are the ones who are going to have to pay for this ultimately, for like employee benefits, to help improve employee productivity and so on as well. But I don't know if you have a different take on it, Aline.
No, I'd say pretty similar. I mean, it's not just the Nordics problem. You would also have that in other geographies, just because it's very hard to pinpoint in terms of timelines. And I agree, B2B could be one solution, but then again, I would also see a bit more flexibility on the consumer side. Again, if I think like about companies like Nico Health, for example, which puts the consumer at the center and which also aims to charge an amount of money that's actually, in terms of health equity, also achievable for people who don't have big budgets. So I think that could be a solution as well. But apart from that, I agree very much. We are also struggling with the same issue.
Yeah, I guess for consumer, it would have to be like the price of a Netflix subscription or something like that. Something that you are willing to pay for the sake of your own health.
Yes, and in the Nordics, people are very often unwilling to pay anything because they expect the society to take care of all your health costs.
Yeah, of course, that's a tough one. Let me switch gears a little bit. So I wanted to talk about generative AI, which I think has been mentioned a lot of the sections so far. I want to think about generative AI in health tech. So, for example, I was reading about how generative AI can be used to improve and reduce admin tasks, but also, for example, between a doctor and a patient, they could listen into a conversation and during an appointment and create a summary for your electronic health records. And then maybe it could be used to simplify complex medical language as well into summaries that patients can understand. So I guess the question is, how do you think generative AI and AI more broadly will impact and improve healthcare? Who would like to go first?
I can.
Okay.
So hopefully in a positive way. I'd say personally I'm a bit between being quite excited about it, but also cautiously optimistic. So I think if you look at the companies that are out there and innovating in that space, companies like Hippocratic AI in the US, for example, I think they raised a massive seed round. They are not yet focused on patient-facing applications. And I think that's also the right step to take first, because I think there are also lots of risks when it comes to Gen AI and patient-facing applications. Think about bias, think about health equity, think about non-reliable information. So I think that's something to take into account as well. But then again, I think there are also lots of opportunities to apply Gen AI before that. If you look, for example, at the massive amount of healthcare research and healthcare data that is out there that no single physician can digest in and of itself, to structure that kind of information and to actually make sure that the right kind of information is channeled to the right kind of physician with the right questions, I think that would be like tremendous opportunity of application.
Yeah.
So therefore, I'd say positively excited, but also a bit cautious in terms of investment.
Interesting. What about you?
That's a great example, I think, exactly. Tools that can help physicians. So, one physician cannot master all the data there is. And I think there are clear low-hanging fruits in several fields, like image processing is one obvious case. I mean, a physician is, let's say, doing a colonoscopy and trying to find any suspect tumorous tissue in the image real time. And machine learning can tremendously help and point out that, hey, look at this, look at this, look at this, while you do it. So it will not replace the physician, it will not take the responsibility, but it will definitely help reach a better quality. A physician who happens to be tired and misses something, then the machine learning will help. So as one person suggested, that you need a system that works for a physician on Monday morning, but also Friday night. I mean, when the physician is getting tired, you still want to get the same quality. Same applies across a lot of image analysis, CT images, MRI, echo. There's a ton of image data that just cannot be processed. Or, same thing in analyzing tumor biopsies.
Yeah.
Getting the better consistent quality regardless of who's analyzing them. So I think those are the low-hanging fruits. Then I think there's a big promise in a lot of fields that is yet to be proven. So that's why we always want to take the approach of clinical data supporting the investment decision. We want to see that something is actually proven with a lot of data behind it in the true clinical setting, that it actually works.
No, it's interesting. I think it's important to think about it as kind of augmenting humans and doctors, basically. So Gen AI, it's kind of reducing human error, as you mentioned, rather than maybe replacing people at this stage.
Yeah, I often talk about the analogy between a self-driving car and an autonomous car.
Yeah.
I mean, probably already today a Tesla would work better than the average human, but if it crashes, then who's responsible?
Yes.
So that's why it isn't yet allowed to take control. And I think it's largely the same thing here. We don't want the computer to make the decision alone, because it will make mistakes. And a physician will make mistakes. But it's acceptable that a human makes a mistake, because then the responsibility is clear.
Yeah.
But we're not mentally ready yet to accept a machine making a mistake that causes someone to die.
And I guess that leads us well into, as you mentioned, now thinking a bit forwards and looking into the future. I think it would be interesting for the audience to hear about, what this sector will look like in 2030, for example. So what do you think is next, and what excites you the most about the future? Aline, would you maybe like to start first?
Sure, happy to start. So I think in terms of change, I would hope it's quicker than some of the change that happened over the last few years. And I also do think that's going to be the case, simply because we have seen quite a bit of movement, for example, on the regulatory front. I think people normally are never happy about regulation, but I think in the case of healthcare, it can actually sometimes really foster innovation, especially when it comes to the distribution of new therapeutics, for example, or also in terms of making sure that physicians actually evolve with digital opportunities, or hospitals actually capitalize on the opportunities that digitization brings. So I think in that regard, I'd be positive and would see more progress than we've seen over the last years. And then I think there are also tremendous opportunities. For example, if you look at the cell and gene therapy space, so that's an interesting area where we've been spending time on, not so much focused on single therapies in and of itself, but very much on the manufacturing side and on the infrastructure that's actually required to bring these kind of therapies. And if you look at the single amount of studies that are out there in the field at the moment and taking place, I think we can be very positive and optimistic in terms of what the world will look like 7 years from now. And there are many more topics I'm excited about. Also, if I think about hospitals and I think about them capitalizing on the data that they have inherently as a source for innovation, I think that's another interesting area. And looking at the pressure that hospitals are under, they also have to reinvent themselves. So we're also quite bullish to invest in that area.
Yeah. Okay.
These are changes that will take time, so I don't expect that in 2030 the healthcare world will look tremendously difficult than it does today. Hospitals will change gradually. We know that the big university hospitals will change first, like they will digitize their pathology and so forth, and then the smaller ones will gradually follow. It's going to look very different 2030 than it does today, but I think it will be a slow and gradual change, and it will continue.
Yeah, and I guess with hospitals as well, you would hope, especially at least in the UK, with the NHS, there's a lot in the news about how they're really under pressure with being understaffed and stuff, and you would hope that there's some solutions that can also address that side of things as well in the future.
Yeah, I think that's going to be very big, and I think a lot of solutions of today that can help kind of reduce the burden of the staff, those will be big things. So everywhere in the Western world, there's a lack of nurses, for instance.
Yeah.
And if you'd ask a nurse, the average nurse would say that they're spending a lot of their time on things that don't really add value and things that don't contribute to them helping the patients. So solutions, technologies that can help reduce that amount, let the nurses focus on the patients. So I think those will be big winners and also highly appreciated by the nurses.
Yeah, no, makes sense. So I want to switch gears again a little bit, because we have a mixture of both investors and founders, and also other groups of individuals in this room. So maybe for the founders in the room, what advice would you have for people working on health startups in the digital health space? Is there anything they should be aware of that investors are looking for, or anything that they should keep in mind? More broadly as well. I'd love to hear advice for some founders in the room.
I mean, the obvious is that there has to be a real need for it. And we have all identified several needs in which we are interested in. I mean, if you have a solution that's addressing a need in a specific field, then try to find an investor who matches that expertise. But I think that's kind of obvious.
Yeah, of course, there should always be a pain point that you're solving for, rather than just kind of, building for the sake of building. That's very important.
So I think also an obvious one, but I have seen amazing technologies actually improving patient lives. However, how to monetize these and how they fit into existing clinical workflows, that's sometimes something that founders tend to put as second priority, and that makes it very hard for us to invest. So I need to see very early on in terms of monetization what the strategy is, and also in terms of adoption into clinical workflows, how that would work. And I think lots of founders tend to overestimate some things and underestimate others. Like, for example, the time it actually takes to sell to hospitals, or the time it takes to sell to clinicians, or the time it takes to actually change patient behavior. I think if you have a good, realistic take on that, you're already very well positioned, because that's sometimes something that takes the back seat, even though it shouldn't.
Yeah, that's true. I guess especially in B2B. Yeah, sorry.
That's a great advice, and that leaves you to, when you're working on your new thing, talk to clinicians, talk to the people who would actually use it, and don't just do this in one country or one hospital, because the workflows can be very different from country to country.
Yeah, I think it becomes particularly important as founders think about scaling their business operations as well. Okay, great. I'm conscious of time. I think we're running low on time. Maybe just one last question. For the audience, we've obviously heard a little bit from everyone about investor trends. We've heard about the founder side of things. Maybe just what is one main message, whether something you said already or something that you think the audience should take away that you haven't mentioned? What is something that you'd like the audience to take away at the end of this panel? Aline, would you like to go first?
So it's my main takeaway. We are very bullish on the healthcare space. We made 3 investments in the healthcare space over the past 12 months. They're not disclosed yet, but we continue to be excited about it, even though sometimes the focus in these discussions is on the challenges. I tend to be very bullish on the space.
Okay.
We are proud to be in a business that tries to help save lives. So be proud of what you're doing, believe in yourself, and be bold taking forward.
That's great. That's a great ending thought to have. Thank you so much, and thank you everyone for taking the time. Appreciate it.